Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox. I'm the Compliance Evangelist, and I'd like to welcome you to This Week in FCPA for the week ending May 19, 2017, Episode 53, the I Left My Heart in San Francisco edition. This week, Jay and I have a wide-ranging discussion of some of the week's top compliance and ethics-related stories. We discuss Brazilian President Temer comes under corruption fire, the continued turmoil at FIFA as FIFA's ethics watchdogs quit in protest after their chairman was fired. We address the question of should ethics and compliance be wedded together and discuss a new report by the Institute of Business Ethics and the Ethics Institute, which considers these issues. We touch upon the Fat Leonard scandal, which lands U.S. Navy Rear Admiral Robert Gilbeau in jail, or rather in prison, with a sentence of 18 months. We consider that fully one-third of all open FCPA investigations involve Brazil, while only 17% involve China. We note the Astros have the best record in baseball and ask the question of whether they will regress to the mean. We consider the inevitable NBA Finals between the West Coast, Golden State Warriors, and the Cleveland Cavaliers. We have an extended conversation about ComTech, which of course is compliance technology, and AI and technology in your compliance program. Jay previews his weekend report, and I would note that it's not too late to join me at Compliance Week 2017, which will be held next week, Sunday through Wednesday, at the Mayflower Hotel in Washington, D.C. If you would like to attend, there's still a discount available to you, and you can go to the show notes for the discount code, and it also has the registration link. This is Tom Fox. Thank you very much for listening to This Week in FCPA. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox. I'm the Compliance Evangelist, and I'd like to welcome you to This Week in FCPA, Episode 53 for the week ending May 19th, 2017, the I Left My Heart in San Francisco edition. As always, I'm joined by my co-host and cohort, Jay Rosen, Mr. Monitors. Jay, why don't you explain to the audience why we have I Left My Heart in San Francisco edition this week?
Thanks, Tom, and good morning, everybody. I am coming to you live or in San Francisco, and I am attending the Society of Corporate Compliance and Ethics, San Francisco Regional Compliance and Ethics Institute. So I am in San Francisco, and believe it or not, it's supposed to be hotter here in San Francisco in the low 90s than it will be in Los Angeles today. So my heart is here in San Francisco, and Tom and I look forward to taking you through the next few minutes and talking about the relevant FCPA stories that hit our radar this week.
So I was in Philadelphia earlier this week, and on Wednesday it hit 90, and they were complaining to me that, oh my gosh, it was 90 degrees. And I just looked at them and said, a nice cool May day. What are you complaining about? So, yes. Well, Jay, we had some interesting stories this week that I think may have some very long-term implications for global politics, global anti-corruption, and kind of a plethora of issues. I'd like to start with a bombshell revelation around the Brazilian president, Michel Temer, where he's alleged that he condoned bribes to silence a key witness in the car wash investigation. And the articles that I've read said that, if this allegation is true, it's not a matter of if he'll resign, but when. And the Brazilian economy would just roiled over this news. The stock market dropped 10% in one day. I'd like to kind of wed that to a report in the FCPA blog today that noted that of all of the 104 open FCPA investigations, fully one-third, or rather almost one-third, 30, are involve the country of Brazil. And I could contrast that with China, which had 17. So less than 17% in China and 30 in Brazil, almost one-third of the list. So it shows how widespread, unfortunately, corruption was in Brazil and what the effect the car wash investigation is having. I've had several guests on my podcast, the FCPA Compliance Report, over the past couple of years to talk about Operation Car Wash and its implications for Brazil. And I think certainly if you have done business in Brazil in the past 5 to 10 years, you're an American company, you really need to take a look at your business model to see if there are any places where money could have bled out to pay bribes and clean that up, because it is not going away.
I think the cynic in me is reminded of Captain Renault's remark in Casablanca, and gambling in Casablanca. It's almost like, corruption in Brazil. It's the numbers really do prove it out, and as you said, Tom, there definitely are some far-reaching effects.
So speaking of gambling in Casablanca, we also had related news on the New England Patriots this week that Tom Brady played 2017 with a concussion. And the news came not, of course, from Tom Brady or the Patriots, but from his wife. So, on one level, it's certainly a violation of NFL policy to not report injuries. On the other hand, if that's how he plays an entire season, concussed, my gosh, how much better can he be?
Right before we got on the air, there was this commercial that I haven't seen, and it's very cloak and dagger, and they're taking Tom Brady all around this hotel, and then they bring him to a beauty rest mattress, and they said, "Will you be needing anything else?" And he's like, "No, I'm fine." So I don't know what that's all about, but I think Belichick is always very I guess not deceptive, but he always plays to the letter of the law with regard to the injury report. And there is a infomatic out there showing the 17 different injuries that Brady has claimed over his years in the NFL, and none of them were concussions. So someone did bring up the possibility that he could have been concussed in practice, or there would have been something that may have happened. You would think for the years he played, and he didn't take the abuse that Romo did, but when you're a quarterback, you're pretty vulnerable. So I'm not surprised by the story, but it'll be I'm sure people will be poring over those Patriots injury reports now and trying to see if there's there might be some fire where there's smoke.
It's gratifying to hear you justifying yet once again the actions of Bill Belichick and the Patriots. You are just the most incredible homer. So,
well, I thought there's a nicer way. I thought you've always called me an apologist.
Maybe you're the self-proclaimed homer. So, go Pats.
No, that was a doe, as in Homer Simpson.
Oh, okay. So, we had a very interesting report that came out from the Institute of Business Ethics and the Ethics Institute, which considered the pairing of ethics and compliance. And the first interesting thing about it was that it was funded by the Canadian-based engineering and construction firm SNC-Lavalin, which, of course, was hit by allegations of improper payments by top executives that led to accounting charges and the departure of the former CEO back in 2012. It's quite a lengthy report, and they had some interesting really comments and thoughts around it. That they pointed out that where ethics and compliance generally have the same goals, they certainly differ in approach, with ethics focused on embedding a common set of values and letting workers exercise their own personal judgment. And compliance tends to be a little more legal and rule-based, by spelling out what can and can't be done. And certainly they overlap, but the report found that each function had its own set of skills, making it difficult to often find an individual who can successfully lead both. So I thought that was very interesting. they provided some different prescriptions and the solutions. So we're going to link to this in the show notes, and I would urge everyone to take a look at it. Ben DiPietro wrote a very good summary in the Wall Street Journal Risk and Compliance Journal. Has always been great reporting. So it's in there as well, and I'll link to Ben's report in the show notes. On the not so good front, if that's a phrase, we had even more fallout, Jay, from the Fat Leonard scandal involving the U.S. Navy, and that's where a fleet service company, the Glenn Defense Marine Asia Company, which provided logistical support to the Navy's 7th Fleet in Southeast Asia from 2006 to 2014, and paid bribes to a plethora of naval officials to obtain over $35 million in profits. To date, the scandal comes to the total number of people charged include 27, 2 admirals, 15 other senior active Navy officers, NCIS special agent, 2 contracting supervisors, and there's another 200 individuals who remain under scrutiny by the prosecutor. Rear Admiral Robert Gilbeau was actually sentenced to prison for 18 months in his role in the scandal. And Sarah Grant, writing in the Global Anti-Corruption blog, noted really the obvious, which is this was not a single or small incident. This was a full-fledged cultural problem, not just a case of a few bad apples. And she goes on to give several prescriptions that the Navy could certainly use to go forward. So a very bad scandal, a huge tarnishing of one of America's great institutions, the United States Navy. So we'll have to see how that continues to play out. And kind of going back across the globe, Jay, last week we talked about FIFA and how it had summarily dismissed the 2 top investigators. Well, now it turns out that their staff has quit in protest over these sackings. So really continual turmoil at FIFA. It's not just in the United States that we see turmoil. And really what this means for FIFA going forward at this point, unfortunately, is an open question whether the U.S. government will accept FIFA's decisions to really just gut their entire investigative staff when there apparently still were open investigations. I have to note that the Houston Astros have the best record in baseball yet again, coming in with a astounding 707 winning percentage. So, go Astros. If you're a betting man, do you bet that they continue this or if they're going to regress to the mean? I explore that in a blog post this week. And then for those basketball fans out there, the inevitable is coming. The first ever 3-year consecutive run of 2 teams, same 2 teams in the championship game, the rubber match between the Cleveland Cavaliers and Golden State Warriors. I don't know, where if you got a dog in this hunt or not, Jay, and how you shake out on the basketball, since of course the Cavs will summarily dispatch your Celtics, and my Rockets were dispatched by the team that Golden State's about to dispatch. But I would say they are the 2 clear heavyweights in this, and frankly, I'm looking forward to just a heck of a finals in the NBA.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a long season in the NBA, and I think both of those teams, Golden State and Cleveland, played really smart. They've protected their best players to make sure they're around for the finals, and this is going back to like Lakers Celtics. It's nice to see this rivalry build up and continue over time. So I do not have a horse in the race. There is a lot of West Coast sentiment for Golden State, and I am in the city by the bay, so I guess I'd like to see it swing back to Steph Curry and his mates.
So, Jay, I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about compliance tech. I've been thinking about artificial intelligence and technology, big data, data analytics, data analysis for many, many months. Matt Kelly and I explore this topic quite a bit, or at least frequently, in our podcast, Compliance Into the Weeds. I recorded a podcast with Roy Snell yesterday where we discussed AI and compliance going forward. You have worked in an industry or in a company that really utilized technology, if not artificial intelligence. So I wanted to kind of explore this topic a little bit, get your thoughts, and really see if you see a way for AI going forward in compliance in things like monitorships and some of the work that you're doing now. So what I saw was, or what I see rather, is a use of technology to get arms around, handle on large amounts of data, whether that be financial data, whether that be words, language as data, or whether that be emails as data, and giving either a lawyer or a compliance practitioner a way to sift through that data and either find red flags that need to be more fully investigated or more fully looked at, or something along those lines, or something that might be so nefarious that perhaps a full stop should happen. And I see compliance tech most clearly in around AML, financial controls, not only for financing and the payment and shipment of money, but in taking a look at the people you're sending the money to, the ultimate beneficial owners, utilizing ComTech in the area of mergers and acquisitions, particularly on the pre-merger / pre-acquisition side, where you get a big data dump generally, and you have a limited time to look at the numbers or any of the information, so that AI and ComTech can be used to really parse through a large data dump and try to get down to the few things that you really need to investigate in the short time that you have to investigate it. Certainly with third parties in the supply chain, every company has a 10 or 50 or maybe even 100x factor of third parties that come into their contractual relationship in the supply chain, as opposed to third-party sales agents. So getting a handle on your third parties in the supply chain. And finally, even things like that may be a little bit closer to the things you've directly had experience with, Jay, and in the use of AI to review contracts to see if there are any non-standard compliance clause terms and conditions. The same could be held true for joint ventures or partnerships, where you're looking at a large number of contracts and you're trying to identify the compliance terms and conditions that need to be reviewed. So that's just sort of my kind of initial thoughts, but where do you see AI and ComTech now, and where do you see it maybe going in the future?
Great question, Tom. I think one of the things, first of all, that I just kind of have gleaned in my probably 10 to 15 years being around this, from an investment banking perspective, from a virtual data room perspective, from a translation perspective, is quite often people are saying that, oh, we don't have time to do all this. We need to close the deal. We need to get this over the finish line. And I think, if you look at Moore's laws and things like that, computing power is always getting, more powerful. Capacity increases, prices drop down. So I don't think there is any longer an excuse that we don't have the time to do this. I think it's really about volition and it's about choice. And if you're going to go into an M&A transaction, or if you're going to do business with a joint venture partner, and the numbers speak. So if you're in Brazil and you're in China, if you don't take the extra time to investigate or spend the extra hundreds or thousands of dollars to properly vet a partner, then whatever happens to you, you've well deserved. So I think There really are no excuses now, and AI is here. It's not going away. And there are data streams that are out there. There is information that should be sifted through and should be vetted before continuing on in all the different areas that you speak about in your blog are definitely areas where AI can be used. And one thing that I liked is you had a quote in here from Gary. How do you say his last name? Kasparov or Kasparov?
Kasparov.
Okay, so he's the Russian chess player, and he recognized that computers do well what humans do badly, and vice versa, suggesting a useful complementarity. Moreover, he argued that humans are often fallible, finding patterns in randomness and correlations where none exist. Computers can help us be more objective and amplify our intelligence. And he even formulated his own theorem, which he calls Kasparov's law, and it reads, weak human plus machine plus better process is superior to strong human and machine and inferior process. So if you've got somebody like that who plays a strategic game like chess and realizes the benefits of AI, I think other people need to take that into their calculations on how to proceed forward on business relationships.
So Jay, I guess what I really wanted to explore with you is this last point of the melding or the wedding of machine AI with human, and I would see in the work that Affiliated Monitors does. Clearly, you're going to need the human element. You need the skill level of Eric and your other partners who have been longtime practitioners in these areas and can assess quickly and properly information that comes in about both things that need further investigation, things that might rise to the level of an ethical violation, or things that might even rise to a higher level of nefariousness. But it's that utilization of the human experience and the human judgment that Kasparov really talks through, and I think is where compliance is going forward. I am not a person who's afraid of this. I don't think you're ever going to take away the human judgment part of it. So I was wondering if you guys have really been able to start to wed the professional judgment and expertise that folks at Affiliated Monitors might have, or have you seen that from any of your prior employers where you were really able to kind of wed that together in a way that exemplified Kasparov's law?
I think one of the things that we're able to do, and again, I wouldn't say it's rocket science, but it's just about using common sense. I remember one situation we were doing work for an oil company, and they had 10 different contracts that they wanted to have translated. And we looked at it, and to do each one of those contracts individually would have cost $30,000. And then they said, do you have a different approach here where you might be able to, get the same results but save us some money? And the solution that we came up with was taking the one contract that was most like the other 9 contracts and translating that from page 1. And then those other 9 contracts we conformed the newly translated contract to match those other 9 ones. And suddenly the price went down from $30,000 to $10,000. So that was us, putting on our thinking cap and figuring out, well, what is the best way that we can leverage technology, i.e., find repetition, find places where we can do the work once and slot that back in. So I think when you look at those types of solutions, that's really taking the prescription that Kasparov speaks to. That it's the problem was how do you translate 30 contracts, and the answer was let's use a little human intellect and figure out a strategy, and then let's use the AI to translate, and then let's go back in and substitute in all the sections that we've translated and tweak the things that are different. So I think that really shows that type of approach and how it can work. in terms of what needs to happen sometimes on a monitorship perspective is that you're going into a company, you have a directive from a settlement agreement that says we need to show the following changes in the company's program. So go in and find these things. And when we're going in, sometimes we actually, do need to use the AI from our perspective to take a look at historical data, to take a look at things that may have failed in the past, and how do we come up and, strengthen those controls so moving forward, the company can make right decisions.
So let me see if I can put that in a different calculus. I was listening to a podcast this morning, Freakonomics, and it had Steve Ballmer on it. And it was a wide-ranging topic or discussion. As you might guess, it touched on the LA Clippers, but it also touched on his Microsoft career. And the host basically said, how could Microsoft have been so wrong about the smartphones? And I thought Ballmer had a really interesting insight. And he said that Steve Jobs did two things. One, he did the technical innovation, which Ballmer certainly saluted, to come up with the concept of the iPhone and basically having a computer in your hand. But he said the part that Microsoft completely missed, that Jobs figured out, was that they figured out the business equation of actually making that computer affordable. And they did that by wedding it to a phone, having AT&T as a development partner to put the computer into the phone. And the most important insight was that they were able to spread the cost to the consumer. Instead of the cost of a computer in your hand, it was now spread into a monthly charge baked into your phone bill, which was just a few dollars more than your phone bill would have been. And so that they were able to essentially fund the development of the delivery mechanism of the computer into the smartphone, but they were able to drive the price down actually by putting it into the phone. And what you just described, Jay, in the process you guys went through when you were able to take that contract price down, to me, that was exactly that description. You were able to use a technological solution to come up with a better business option, and that business option was what made that particular deliverable you had for that customer financially viable. And so you made a sale on that translation for those contracts, which it would have been cost prohibitive at $30,000, but at $10,000 it was a different discussion and equation for the customer. That entire discussion is what I would like to see in compliance, because as compliance evolves and compliance moves forward, and over the years we've heard many people talk about what's the ROI of compliance. We've seen papers around what's the ROI of compliance. Well, I think that we can actually move past that to what's the business opportunity for utilizing compliance. And if we can bring these ComTech solutions, technological solutions, AI solutions into the compliance world, you can make your delivery of whatever that is much more financially viable, and then in turn make your company run more efficiently, so at the end of the day it's going to run more profitably. So I was really intrigued by your description of how you were able to use AI, ComTech, around translations of contracts to create a viable financial option for not only your company, which made money, but also the customer. So that's really the great strength of where I see AI going for the compliance function.
Yeah, this will be something that I think is an area that we're going to see more and more, innovation in. And I know you and I always find new companies at our conferences who are making, incremental progress and getting the cost down, and also increasing the efficacy of the solution.
So, Jay, unfortunately, we're near the end of our time, but I was wondering if you might have any hints or even highlights of the Jay Rosen Weekend Report for our listeners.
Yeah, what I'm going to do is do a summary of the different sessions that I'm going to today, and it's a real, since it's a one-day conference, there's a real broad spectrum of subjects that we're looking at. Some of them are very timely. First session is an overview of the changing landscape of employment law. Then we're going to something that has been in the news for the last week or so, cyber threats and defense and FBI perspective. We're going to take a look at the Yates memo 1 year later. Stephanie Yonakura, who's a partner at Hogan's Level, is going to touch that. And a couple of my friends, Sue Gong and Paul Starrett, are going to be talking what we were just discussing, data science investigations and privacy implications. And finally, going into the home stretch, there's some folks from PwC, and Alan Gibson from Microsoft was supposed to be joining, but he's not. The subject is using big and little data to build a proactive risk management program, which is exactly what we're discussing. And then at the end of the day, Leonard Shen from Visa is going to be speaking about soft skills and tips for success for compliance and legal professionals. So there's expected to be about 75 folks here, mostly from the West Coast. So I'm really looking forward to the conference and hope to give you my thoughts when I'm going home on the plane tonight. So that's what I'm doing. Tom, were you in Philly this week, and anything to speak on about that?
So, a couple of events in Philadelphia. One, I put on a training session with our friend Jonathan Marks of the Markham firm for the Institute of Internal Auditors in Philadelphia. And then I put on a very interesting presentation with Ben Lockwin, kind of a pharmaceutical type maven at a pharmaceutical conference where we talked about risk assessment, and drug pricing. But Jay, if there are any listeners who are on the fence about going to Compliance Week starting Sunday night and Monday in Washington, I hope you will consider joining us. I'm leading a panel of Ren McEachern and Kara Brockmeyer. I'm also on a panel with Joe Mont and Bill Coffin, the editor-in-chief of Compliance Week. Listeners to this podcast can receive a discount. So if you're on the fence and you'd like to go, please consider joining us. It's, as always, one of the top annual compliance-related conferences. So with that, Jay, you want to take us home?
Sure. So on behalf of my colleague and cohort, Tom Fox, the compliance evangelist, and myself, Jay Rosen, Mr. Monitor, we'd like to thank you for listening in and joining us discussing the FCPA week that was for the week ending May 19th, 2017.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox again. I'd like to thank you for listening to This Week in FCPA. If you've listened to this podcast on iTunes, I would greatly appreciate it if you would rate our podcast, as it would help in the rankings and also help get out the word about the only weekly podcast wrap-up. Also, if you have any questions, please email me at tfox@tfoxlaw or jrosen@affiliatedmonitors.com. This is Tom Fox. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of This Week in FCPA, and I hope you'll join us next week for another edition.